Happy Tuesday, everybody. Early election time. Actually, you know what is the... Let's see, election day. Yeah, today's the first day of the elections. People got their eyes on that New York election. Cuomo versus Mamdani, I believe. I hope the controversial one wins. That's just my opinion. Yeah. I did not plan to make this a political stream, so it's not gonna be, but it is the one everyone's focused on. And look at that. Even I can't I can't seem to keep my eyes off it either, so. I guess it's really early, so, you know, I guess I haven't counted anything, obviously. Yeah. So polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be 6 o'clock Pacific. I almost said specific. What am I doing? Curtis Sliwa. How do you say that one? Andrew Cuomo's running as an independent. That's funny. It's really funny. You know, it's like I don't actually know much about Mamdani. I don't know much about him. I don't know much about Cuomo. I actually don't know much about any of these candidates running in New York because I don't live in New York. That being said, I do try to be educated in some ways, best I can. It's good to, you know, you should know what's generally going on in the country, in my opinion. You know, politics is, yeah, whatever, but. The one thing I do know about Mamdani is that it seems like a lot of the establishment players are really, really against him. And that includes people in his own party, the Democrats, which I find fascinating, really fascinating. And obviously Andrew Cuomo, I believe, was a Democrat, right? Andrew Cuomo, I mean, he's running it as an independent, but I don't think he actually is. Well, I mean, he is on paper, but... was, let me see, or am I wrong about that? Yeah, Democratic Party, yeah, he was, right? And wasn't he a member of the Democratic Party? Yeah. And I do know that he was also known for resigning. Yeah, he was the governor of New York, and he resigned because he was like a kind of a creepy guy. That was a while ago, right? Well, it's not that long ago. And now he's back as an independent. Again, I don't know much about him other than he does seem like an establishment Democrat, which I do know a lot about establishment Democrats. And they should all be killed. I mean the party, of course. The party. Not the people. The party. Yeah, all these people need to, all these parties should cease to exist. Though obviously it's not the party that's the, you know, issue, it's the establishment, it's the behavior, it's, you know, the tribalism, the us versus them. You all know this, you don't need to hear that from me. But if there is a big problem in this election in New York City, is that it does seem like Zoran represents Mamdani represents a big change of the status quo, and that's as much as I know about it. I know he's being painted as a communist and socialist and all this stuff. Maybe true, maybe not be true. But I do see that kind of pattern of behavior where Democrats and Republicans, these sort of establishment career politicians, come out, and if anything represents a big deviation from, you know, the status quo, they do come out and kind of shit all over that. For one, I just like modern republic, like oh my god, I do know that Cuomo's getting endorsements from just about every rich person in the United States, which already tells you what you should know about that. That's a little bit. I know Elon Musk came out and endorsed him. Cuomo. A lot of angry little Twitter bored rich people really love that guy. I don't even think they really like Cuomo. It's just, it's not Mamdani. So, based on that, it's some high level of skepticism there, because I don't like that the Republican Party is, in a lot of respects, sort of the party of elites. It's almost like the, what's that saying that people say, that what Republicans say or the right wing says is a projection. So they do see Democrats as sort of the party of elites and privileged people and all this stuff. But from what I understand, well, actually from what I see, I should say, what is it, like every big name tech CEO has essentially kissed Donald Trump's ring, you know? They're all rushing in there to kiss his ass. They were all at his inauguration. What a strange sentence to say. And that's so absurd to me. You don't have to be a Democrat. I'm sure there are plenty of Republicans out there that are very nice people. But how can you see that and be like, this guy is going to drain the swamp, when... How can he do that when he's buddy-buddy with all these incredibly wealthy people who are very clearly there to pacify him, kiss his ass? You know what I mean? It's very clear that Trump does not represent the big change that a lot of his base necessarily believes in. I would say more of his working class base, because obviously the more middle class, rich people that do vote for Trump know exactly what they're getting. They're not going to be worrying about their food stamps running out, because they're obviously not on it. You know? They're not going to worry about their student loan forgiveness being canceled because the state doesn't want to abide by some sort of Trump pact to, you know, play by our rules, or you won't get what you need. They're not the ones being abducted on the streets by ICE members. And the thing is that you can be against illegal immigration. I don't think anyone in this country is for illegal immigration necessarily. I'm not for it. Right? But it's another thing to be like, hey, let's deputize this wing of the government to abduct people on the streets, shoot people, be masked, you know, and then in the process sweep up Americans. You know, that's no accident. And you see that it's all facade, because a lot of these people that are for all these policies, they talk about these like big name Republicans and libertarians who are about government overreach. You know, the whole thing has been government out of our lives. You know, the whole states' rights battle was always a facade too, and I saw right through that. The whole abortion thing, the gay marriage thing, it's states' rights, and that's why they were so against, you know, it being ratified as any sort of, you know, national law. They're being forced to, you know, marry gay people, being forced to allow doctors to perform abortions. The whole states' rights thing to me has always just screamed as, well, they know they lost that. Well, previously they know they had lost that messaging. They know they couldn't win on that messaging. So the whole states' rights argument really was just a compromise on their behalf. Because in reality, it's not really about abortion. It's not about gay marriage. It's not about religious discrimination, as they put it. It's about controlling people's lives, controlling sexuality. More than that, the whole abortion thing is really more religious piety. I care more about children than you, liberal. Because conservatives have this sort of idea that, or this reputation that they are in fact kind of evil, right? That's kind of their reputation, that they only care about themselves, they only care about their own tribe. It's white tribes, right? Like, liberals have this list of facts, just binders full of facts. Shout out to Mitt Romney, of conservatives just kind of being shitheads, not caring about their fellow countrymen and countrywomen, country theys, if you will. And so the whole abortion thing really is more about, and that's where the QAnon stuff kind of spins off into too, is the, I know I'm all over the places, I promise I'll come back to it. I'm making a point here, sir. Women, ladies, men, whoever's listening, anybody, nobody. The whole abortion thing, the whole save the children thing, the whole Pizzagate, QAnon, whatever you want to call it, save kids from the trans agenda, it really is more just moral posturing. It's the big project to try to cleanse the conservative right-wing reputation amongst liberals. You say I don't care about anybody? How can I care? How can you say that when I care about the most innocent thing on the planet? Children. But of course that's also a facade, because these people, you know, there's a lot of slippage there. It's like you talk about, especially amongst these people, these big save the children, anti kind of, you know, predator thing, pedophiles, you know, we gotta save the children. Well, when it comes to feeding the children, well, that's a different question. You know, free school lunches, oh, that's parental responsibility. Now suddenly the children don't matter. It's a parental issue. Locking children in cages, separating children from their family. Right now ICE is detaining like students, right? It's detaining students, it's just detaining kids, right? They get caught up in this. And where's the outrage there? Where's the save the children there? Because it's never been about children. Or rather, it's been about the right children. You know? So I do find that stuff kind of despicable. The idea here is, and you know, using these words is we talk about white supremacy, but with this government, it's pretty much impossible to ignore. It's save the children, but save the right children. Save the children that are gonna conform, they're gonna be complicit, that I can mold. I was recently watching this video about radical unschooling, which apparently it's a thing that a lot of these creepy new age people do, where they pull their children out of school, or it's essentially a form of bizarre homeschooling, where the parents that have their kids at home, they're trying to teach them at home, and their idea of academics is letting the kid figure it out. It's teaching kids concepts of the real world, quote unquote real world, by allowing them to just kind of explore on their own. They have a question about the stars, they have a question about the cereal box, they have a question about why is this and that. Well, that's when you teach them. That's, in a nutshell, that's the idea of radical unschooling. The whole homeschool thing itself is sort of an offshoot of, you know, it's kind of the conservative right-wing I want to keep my children away from the public, because they see the public as a corrupting force, corrupting influences, and a lot of homeschooling is essentially that. So you do hear a lot about, now there's a lot of reasons to homeschool, I should be clear. It's not a diatribe about homeschool. I'm talking about the more philosophical roots of it. You know, homeschooling is a way to essentially keep the kids away from what the parents deem as corrupting forces. Keep them away from, you know, and before it was simple things, well, relatively simple things. It was religiosity. It was keeping them away from evolution and the sciences and, you know, sort of these secular concepts. Things that were in some respects an affront to the homeschool parents' ideas of the world, according to, you know, their interpretation of the Bible. And then now when I see this radical unschooling, and these people kind of telling themselves it is now keeping the kids away from the influences they don't want. That is, public schools want to teach kids that, you know, gays are natural, you know, science, questioning, skepticism, trans people exist, diversity, multiculturalism. All these things to them are perverting forces in their lives, in their children's lives. And they see that as a failing, as a systemic failing. And they want to essentially unplug themselves from that. So that's sort of the roots of homeschooling, which in turn is radical unschooling. So, yeah. As you can see, I'm kind of rambling here. I you know, it's like I have a lot of thoughts about this stuff. And surprisingly, I have not learned too much about Mamdani. Don't know as much about Cuomo other than he does have like a lot of creepy allegations behind him. And one thing I do know with what I do know is that I'm always highly skeptical when some idiot is yelling about communism and socialism. There's something you should be inherently skeptical about someone who's pulling out a boogeyman like that. Is Mamdani a communist? I mean, it seems absurd to say that. I can't definitively answer that. Obviously, I don't know much about him, but I have my doubts. I have my doubts. I guess this is more about the general state of the world. I'm not endorsing either guy. Obviously, I can't endorse. I don't live in New York. But things are absurd, you know? It's a very absurd time. God, I went off the deep end there. I'm supposed to be playing a game. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's like, what was I watching the other day? Or what was I listening to? Sorry. Yeah, it's just, it's a lot to wrap your head around too, because if there's just so much noise. It's so much noise. It's just this kind of post-truth era we live in, alternative facts. It can give you like really bad headspin. And I understand why people feel, for example, a guy like Trump speaks to their needs. I understand it. Because it's packaged in such a way that it seems appealing. It comes off as appealing. And Trump's a funny guy. He's very charming. He's very funny. He's a very funny guy. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, like, oh, he's a clown. No, I mean, he's legitimately a funny guy. He seems like a fun guy to hang out with, Trump. You know? It's what he stands for that it's fucked up. And I think it's unfortunate that a party like the Republican Party, these right-wingers that are against all this sort of government overreach and tyranny, have essentially, you know, it's like It's always kind of been that. It's we're against government overreach, but not in this way. We're against people's First Amendment rights being violated. But, you know, that trans stuff does hurt our feelings, so we need to keep that away from kids, you know? It's almost like the whole... I have some Republican beliefs. I have conservative... Obviously, we all have varying beliefs. But the thing that keeps me away from specifically Republicans, the one that I just kind of look back and I just shake my head is like, there's just inherent contradictions there that are hard to ignore. And the only reason you can't ignore them, or the only way you can't ignore them and support that, is if you equivocate, you rationalize in your head, because you learn in this world that it's very easy to rationalize contradictions. You know, a lot of these people in the same breath will talk about freedom of speech, talk about censorship, you know, and then in the same breath we'll talk about, well, we need to, you can't make fun of Charlie Kirk, you can't talk about his assassination other than absolute fealty to it. You have to be bleeding heart about his death. You know, a lot of these people have made their sort of platform as, you know, comedy has been illegal. Under Trump, comedy is back. Well, apparently not. Can't say that. So I find all that stuff kind of really repugnant, you know? And I have a hard time really believing... Hold on, Democrats are fucking losers, right? This is not a centrist spiel, I should be clear. I'm as progressive and left-wing as I feel I am. That being said, you know, I'm human. I can't reduce my beliefs to just right-wing or left-wing, because I have a lot of right-wing beliefs, I have some left-wing beliefs. You know, I don't believe in illegal immigration. The state I live in, you know, there is a lot of social safety nets. That being said, a lot of money is sort of, could be better spent, you know, could be better spent. I don't believe with all taxation policies. I don't believe in all that stuff. I can't be fit into a box, and I think most people can't be either. And so I really don't try to fall into the tribalism of left versus right. I don't, you know, the thing with, I guess what I'm saying is that, like, I would like to, you know, this sort of team politics is it's really detrimental. It's detrimental. The system sucks. I guess my original point was that, yeah, I do have those beliefs. I don't agree with illegal immigration. I don't agree with, yeah, I think rapists and criminals should be deported, you know, brought to justice and all that stuff. I don't believe in tax fraud, you know, all these things that these Republicans are against, you know, I do believe you should have absolute freedom of speech but oh wait, let me walk that one back, because that's not true either. There's no such thing as absolute freedom of speech. Not in this country. Not in this country with the history of McCarthyism. Are you kidding me? Like, it's never been a thing. It's a romanticization by modern idiots. By the Musks and the Trumps and the right-wing influencers who are red in the face crying about how the country used to be this freedom of speech bastion. Like, since when? When did that ever exist? We literally used to lock up communists. You know? What are they talking about? I guess what I'm saying is that I believe on paper, the things that the right wing and the Republicans do believe as well. And I think a lot of people do feel that way. You know? I don't think that's controversial to say. But I question the intent there. You know, we talk about this word called fascism, you know, which is now becoming one of those words where you throw it out and then someone throws their hands up and goes, oh, everything is fascism, you know, essentially just shut the argument down. And that's a bullshit tactic, you know, but essentially that is what we're seeing, is the rise of fascism. It's authoritarianism, because they go, hey, we're against illegal immigration, right? Well, that's an easy target. That's the thing you should always be skeptical about, is that it always starts with the easy targets. Okay, illegal immigration, sure, we're gonna go after the criminals. Okay, they're going after the high school senior. Granted, yeah, he's in his country illegally, sure, but I guess in a purest sense he's a criminal, but that's not what they intend. That's not what they were saying. They're talking about violent criminals. That's what they were implying, right? Okay, so but they're breaking the law. Okay, we got them. Well, what about those American citizens? Oh, they were interfering with whatever it is that ICE was doing. It's nonsense. And that in itself flies in its face of this sort of anti-tyranny. You know, the whole QAnon thing is a government overreach and the deep state and all this stuff, and it's all coded to be like, well, we're you know, small government Republicans, right wings, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. And then they deploy ICE to just start kidnapping people, with the understanding that their information is correct, that any citizen being caught up in the system is just the price you have to pay. And that's bullshit. That's nonsense. It's bullshit. Suddenly government tyranny is off the table, because now it's what we wanted to do. You know, now we're gonna governments on we're going to use the government's tools as our weapons. That's really what we meant. So you can be against illegal immigration and be completely against what these clowns have been up to, because you're right to think there's something more at play here, that these tools that they're utilizing can also just be slowly turned over to American citizens. They can start being used on us. And indeed they have been. And indeed they have been. And it's wild that the whole Charlie Kirk thing was, you know, that's what one of the things too that just gives me head spin. If you just, it's this crazy world. And I think the reason I choose not to talk about it is because explaining this stuff thoroughly requires a level of, it's complicated, and it's not, you have to kind of explain away, you have to explain these contradictions, and anyone who's tried knows it. Like, if you ever run across a conspiracy theorist, realize that it's actually pretty difficult to thoroughly speak with these people and speak to their points, because debunking doesn't become debunking. They're on a completely different level. How do I explain this? They're not coming from facts. They're not coming from facts and logic. They're coming from emotions and ideology. They're coming from faith. And faith flies in the face of logic and reasoning. It's a feeling. QAnon is a feeling most above anything. It's something you feel, it's something you intuit. Yeah, there's evidence that, you know, they'll point to. They have mountains of evidence, of course they do. But you debunk each and every one, and the goalpost just keeps moving. And it's very clear that this was never about evidence. This was never about, you know, the evidence is just there as convenience. It's a feeling, it's politics. These are our political enemies, and we want to justify harming them as much as possible. Evidence or not. That's kind of the conspiratorial minded kind of, that's the conspiracy mindset pretty much. And you see it, you know, like 9/11 truthers, I mean, that whole thing has been debunked. Every single point has been debunked to death. But notice that the movement there hasn't gone away. These people aren't convinced by your rationality. They're not convinced by your rationality. They're not convinced by your debunking. Because what 9/11 is, at the root of it, it's a anti-government conspiracy. It's all about Bush did this, and we're skeptical of them. It's politics first than anything, and it satisfies those kind of anti-government beliefs. It is ideology from the ground up. It is political ideology that's masquerading as a form of science, a form of hard evidence. That's just window dressing. And so there's always a bigger enemy, right? And it all then, you know, forms into like the whole Illuminati thing, the New World Order, the Bilderberg Group, and the Trilateral Commission, and then obviously then it offshoots into like Pizzagate stuff, and you get the QAnon and whatever nonsense we have now. I think QAnon's still alive, right? Yeah, yeah. Someone's at my door. Okay, I got the news early. Oh, never mind. It's like they came for me, baby. They came for me. In a lot of ways, the Trump administration are geniuses. They truly are geniuses. You know? The kind of rhetorical gymnastics they're pulling over there has allowed them to get away with a lot of bullshit. A lot of actual tyranny. A lot of actual authoritarianism. You know? Oh boy. Oh boy. It's crazy times. And it's unfortunate, you know, that we get the Democratic Party who, I mean, I cannot name you somebody who I would gladly endorse. I would begrudgingly endorse. But even that's kind of falling apart because, like, the whole idea of voting for the lesser evil. And the thing is that you can see why Republicans, Trump, the right wing, the far right, has had such success in the past few years, in the past decade. Because a lot of what they say about liberals and the left wing are absolutely correct. They are complacent elites. They are career politicians. They are virtue signaling dweebs. You know, those things are not false. They're absolutely true. You know, they are for the establishment. That's a fact. It's disappointing, honestly. You know? The one thing I will say, and I remember around election time when Trump won, and I think they had that whole early debacle with Doge or Dog, whatever the fuck they want to call it, that the Department of Government Efficiency. Stupid fucking bullshit. Like, and the fact that during that election they were ostensibly buying votes. I do remember that. That Elon Musk was holding those $1 million like raffles, which if the left wing was doing, you would not hear the end of it from right wingers. They would be accused of collusion, of corruption. They're accused of collusion and corruption no matter what. But if they pulled that stunt, that naked hypocrisy of, you know, this plausible deniability. Of course there always is, because they're not that stupid, you know. But that was essentially a absurd political stunt, right? But they did that. So those kind of things. And government efficiency, whether just firing people, they're just taking over. The fact that Trump is just kind of defying judges, and it's petulance. I mean, don't get me wrong, like even with the SNAP thing now, it's like the judge ruled that they have to, the Trump administration does have to find a way to fund fund SNAP for November, you know. And in response, I think it's the administration, it's like, well, we'll do half. Yeah, well, okay, all right, half. It's petulance. It's absolutely just man-child nature. But the one thing that oh, and the National Guard stuff, just sending people into states, and you know, suddenly it's states' rights, right? Where did that come from? Well, let's just send the government into states, the federal government, and start just kind of arresting citizens in these states. And it's just so, the audacity, you know. The one thing I admire about all that stuff is that Trump, the current right wing as it is, this administration, this cabinet, Stephen Miller, these people, Pam Bondi, what is his name? Kesh Patel? I forgot his name. The director of the FBI. Is that you can't, the thing I admire about them is that they're just doing what they want to do. They're not waiting there. They're not waiting for people. They're not waiting for approval. Which, of course, in a system of checks and balances that we have, you know, this democratic system, the House and all this stuff, the Congress, the executive branch, judicial branch, etc., obviously that's not good, because we do need to keep that power in check. But after years of democratic complacency, I admire that they're just doing what they want to do, what they said they were going to do. They're just going to go in there and kick ass. I'm not saying it's good, and I don't agree with which asses they're kicking, but I admire that so much that, I mean, if you're a Trump supporter, you got to be happy as fuck. And I don't mean all Trump support, I mean like a middle class. I can't even say that actually, because the tariffs have driven, you know, the cost of shit up, and I'm sure that's not what they expected, right? I'm saying there's a part of you that if you are a Trump voter, you got to be happy in some respects. You got to be like, oh, this administration, you know, especially if you're a QAnon guy, you believe in a deep state, it's like, oh, he's indicting, you know, his political enemies. These are the perpetrators of the deep state. My goodness. You just got to be like elated. And I do admire that about the Trump administration, is that they're actually just doing things. They're doing them. And then what are Democrats doing? Well, they're infighting with Mamdani. They're refusing, they're reluctant, they're quiet to endorse him. A guy that, from what I understand, actually does represent a change to the status quo. And for some people that's enough. You know, for people that's enough, because you get enough Democrat ruling, this complacency, you can see like how a guy like Mamdani is very appealing to younger voters, especially those Gen Zers, you know. And I don't like to talk very generally like that, like generationally like that, because it's, people aren't monoliths, you know. People have unique views, you know. But everyone's sick of this. Everyone is sick of this, from the boomers that vote for Trump to Gen Xers, whatever you want to call them, millennials, Zers, alphas. I don't have stupid ass names for these generations. Like, well, maybe not alphas. I don't think they're young enough to even understand any of this. But if you're of political age, you know, right, voting age, with the access of information we have, the one thing that we can all agree on, whether you're experienced with the system or not, is that everyone is fucking sick of this. Everyone is sick of this system. It is horrible. Horrible. And that's how you get a guy in Trump in power, because on paper, he seems to represent a lot of this rejection of the system. He seems to represent that. He's a guy that does speak to our anxieties, social anxieties, economic anxieties. No one likes criminals. Jobs are going away. Jobs are less paying. The work-life balance sucks. We are less close to our neighbors. The world does feel isolating. There are struggles to being a man in this world. The modern dating scene sucks. And there's appeal in there for women too. There is. It sounds crazy, but there are Trump voters that are women. And what is their appeal? What do they get from him? Part of it is that he appeals to that kind of traditionalist, and I say traditionalist in quotes here because these people kind of bastardize these terms, and what they are, they're romanticizing a past that didn't exist. Or that was exclusive to very specific people, but they're romanticizing it, you know? So, for example, like women that love Trump is that he speaks to, you know, these sort of Christian traditionalist views of the role of women and men. And while, you know, maybe to an egalitarian feminist, someone like me, I would say, you know, I don't want to cop out to that, someone like me, the idea that you just stick to these sort of, you confine yourself to these gender roles is a little alien. I don't agree with it. That being said, there's comfort in simplicity. There's comfort in conformity. And I don't mean that in a derisive way, because life is incredibly complex. And that complexity creates anxiety, whether you like it or not. It's chaotic, and life is chaotic. Reality is chaotic. There's no order to any of this. But we try to make sense of it. Every one of us tries to make sense of the world. It's complicated, it's complex, it's chaotic. So we categorize, we label, we create routines. It's a way for us to make sense of all this noise. And so you might think it's like insane that some like housewife wants to be a housewife. You might think it's insane that some guy just wants to, I don't know, hunt deer, right? And then just go home and be, I don't know, provider or whatever. It might be insane that, you know, some people just want to wear a shirt and pants, and that might seem strange, right? It seems like an absurd thing to say, but there's comfort in that simplicity. Not every one of us wants to be radical. You know? I remember Rick Roderick, who's an incredible, I should say, he passed away, I think, 2001. Rick Roderick, if you don't know about him, go look him up. He has an incredible series of speeches on postmodernism. He kind of explains, gives sort of the finer points of what the postmodern condition is. You know, and I don't want to go too far off on the postmodern condition because that word itself is loaded. And it represents a series of ideas and beliefs that are not exclusive to right or left wing. You know, you hear that word postmodernism and some people just start dismissing you. That's ignorance. You know, that's people trying to put you in that box. But what it describes as the postmodern condition is even that. When you say certain words, when you say liberal, when you say SJW, when you say Mayo side or fascist, these are all words we use to simplify the conditions of the world. And that's not an inherently bad thing. I want to be clear. It's not a bad thing. It's just noticing this pattern of behavior, these sort of backdrops to our life. The way we try to reduce complexity, make it more palatable, make it more understandable. You know, those things are not inherently bad. They're not. That's not what this is about. What I'm saying is that Trump does represent, at least to these people, simplicity. You know, simplicity. It's not good simplicity, because it is almost willful ignorance. And that is the problem, is that when you start ignoring the actual complexity, the actual discussions, the actual dialogue, then you get Trump, who sells you on simplicity, who sells you that BLM, cop brutality, systemic racism, these things are either exceptions or works of infiltrators. And actually, there's no such thing as systemic racism. There's no real such thing as police brutality. Because then you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about, well, why do people of color have such an adversarial relationship with police? Because that why is complicated. More so, that why might incur discussions about social safety nets, might have to incur discussions about providing taxpayer money to improve the infrastructure for the inner city. It might require admitting that the state has failed its people, or a segment of its people, I should say. Likely the poor people, right? Poor class. The state has failed a segment of its population. And in our capitalist society, that usually means paying for things. And of course, if you make everything an issue of personal responsibility, then systemic issues don't exist. Why should I have to pay for some black person, brown person, Arab, Indian, Asian, African? Why should I have to subsidize their food costs, their living expenses? You know? It's personal responsibility. And that is the appeal of Trump. That is the appeal of the right wing. Is if you're well off, right? And you slowly, through decades of messaging, start to believe that things like welfare queens are running rampant, right? That there's exceptional fraud to social safety nets, you know? Then that's very appealing to you. And this is where not paying for school kids' lunches comes from, because those lunches are going to be provided to poor kids. And why should they have to pay for what they think amounts to parental irresponsibility? And as you can see, the appeal is there. I almost just made the case for you if you're listening to this, if anybody's listening to this. Right? You see it as like, why should I have to be responsible for someone else's irresponsibility? But obviously things are never that simple. Yes, of course, individual responsibility, individualism is an important factor. It does matter. There are people that are honest to God fuck-ups. There are fuck-ups on the welfare system. There are fuck-ups accepting food stamps. There are fuck-ups on, you know, public housing subsidies or whatever. You might know one in your life. You may be one. I don't know. I don't want to judge, right? I don't know. I may be one. You don't know me. But when we're talking about societal issues, individualism does become less and less of a factor. That's just a inconvenient truth to a lot of these people who want to scream about individualism. Which, this is why it's such a hard thing to talk about, because even that is nonsense. Even that is a facade, because we talk about individualism, right? We talk about this idea of personal responsibility and Americans and da-da-da-da, and you know, it's freedom of expression, you know. I don't agree with some Nazi saying the N-word, but he should have his right to say it. And if it's wrong, then the marketplace of ideas should... Of course, it doesn't apply to any trans issues. That doesn't apply to gay people. That doesn't apply to critical race theory, as they put it. You know? Those things are beyond the pale. That's not freedom of speech, because those things are going to uproot our entire system. They're against democratic values. Now you would think that a person that's defying gender roles, defying those expectations. You know, I present as a cis hetero guy, right? I don't consider myself radical in terms of expression, gender expression. In that respect, I'm pretty conformist. I present generally like a regular guy, like an average guy. Nothing particularly exceptional about my appearance, right? T-shirts and pants. I always believe in that. Simplicity in that. It's beautiful, baby. I highly recommend it. But you would think these frothing them out individualists and freedom of First Amendment people, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, all this stuff. You would think they'd be for the guy wearing a dress. Because what screams individualism more than a guy that does not give a fuck about your gender conformity? And that is another reason why I just don't buy into those arguments. I don't buy into those beliefs. I hear someone screaming about the First Amendment and about how comedy is illegal. You can't make fun of anything. How you can't even be a man in this world. How individuals don't exist. And it's like, well, there are these people here that are a significantly small segment of the population, you know, trans people, gay people in specific, who are defying those things. Defying, you know, they are being absolute individualists, and you want to squash them out. So part of me I'm saying is, if I don't believe your spiel, I don't really believe you're for individualism. I don't believe you're for the First Amendment. I don't believe you're for freedom of speech. You're for freedom of expression. I don't even think you really believe in the Constitution. I just think that's the thing that these people appeal to hide their, like, real reasoning, to hide their real intentions. Because it's a lot easier to go, hey, this guy said that you should be able to sleep with minors, and he's a white supremacist, and he, you know, he believes in the ethno state, and that black people should be sent back to Africa, right? That kind of stuff, right? It's easy to go and, like, hey, well, that, you know, I don't, the guy go, this little agitator go, well, I don't believe in that, but I believe in his right to say it. First Amendment, baby. Right? And sure, I'm not on 4chan or 8kun or 8chan or some other shithole on the internet, you know, trying to police these people. You know, it's like, whatever, shitty people exist, right? We can agree on that. I'm like, I don't necessarily care, but whatever, it is your right. Right? It's a lot easier to defer to that, especially if you're a bad faith person, like a lot of these right wingers, a lot of these fascists are, a lot of these far right are, where they just go like, well, you know, he's, and it's just like, oh, what's freedom of speech, right? So you get the Elon Musks who are out there going, you know, quoting, retweeting racists, you know, white supremacists, and they always defer to, well, I don't believe in those, you know, I don't endorse his racist beliefs, but, you know, he's saying some nice things. You know, I believe in the First Amendment, you know. And these people talk about how, like, you can't say anything, it's cancel culture, you can't even, freedom of speech is under attack. And you question, well, what speech are you referring to? Then go, because what they're referring to is people being able to call trans people trannies and gay people faggots, right? They want to defend those things because that's how they feel. Because they feel those people are those things. You know, it's a lot easier to defer to the First Amendment than have to defend that speech because it is repugnant. I think racism and bigotry is morally reprehensible. But that's a whole different thing than freedom of speech, right? And that's their true intention, is they want to normalize that behavior. They want to continue to normalize that behavior. They want to be able to discriminate against people that aren't conforming to their rigid ways of life. Right? I always felt like if you're such a freedom of speech warrior, then you would absolutely love critical race theory. You would love the kind of what the so-called postmodern neo-Marxist nonsense are talking about, because this stuff, I can't imagine something more American than something that's un-American. Right? The truest form of freedom of speech is the kind that subverts it in some ways. And that's a tricky thing to handle. The thing is that these people are not, they're trying to piss on your back and tell you it's raining. You know? That's what they're trying to do. Is that they go, we love the Constitution, America number one, America exceptionalism, we don't believe in cancel culture, and then turn their backs and immediately justify arresting a guy for posting a Trump meme. You know, I'm sure it's an exception. I don't want to, you know, mound out of molehills. It's an exception. Currently it's an exception, but people I think have been fired for, you know, making fun of Charlie Kirk's death or not being totally, you know, babbling or sort of sobbing over it. But there's a guy that got arrested for sharing a Trump meme, and how do you justify that? Well, you can't justify it. It's unjustifiable. But notice that they're doing it anyways. It's unjustifiable that we're arresting American citizens, so we're just rounding people up in the streets. And I think we went through this a couple of years ago in Arizona, if I recall. Right? There was a law or something passed in Arizona that gave police the ability to essentially citizenship test on the street, and they didn't think you were a citizen. They would just have the power to detain you, put you in the center or some shit like that, right? And there was huge pushback because this was a different time, you see. Back then Republicans weren't absolutely full of shit. Back then Democrats weren't absolutely, well, they've been about the same, I should be clear. And I think it was found in Constitution or some shit like that. Or it fizzled out, right? But now it's back on the table, baby. And all that talk about government tyranny doesn't matter if it's against our political enemies. It's genius. It's genius. I will say one thing before wrapping this whole rambling thing up, is that I've been saying that Trump administration is geniuses. Their rhetorical judo moves are genius, except they fucked up. And this is the problem with the right wing, the far right. Because the far right is inherently a loser's position. Fascism is loserdom, and the one thing about the far right is that no one has to defeat the far right. The far right will defeat themselves. They will eat themselves alive. And this is evidentiary. If you spend any time in any of these far right circles, these white supremacists, Christian nationalists, these fascist, authoritarian, frothing in the mouth type people, if you spend any time in their circles, you see how much they hate each other. They hate each other. They are so angry at everything, at the state of the world. No one hates a far right person more than a far right person hates a far right person. They hate liberals, but they hate white far right people so much more. Because the enemy is always within. There's always some new form of religiosity within the movement, some new form of piety, some new form of conformism. Conformity, I should say. It requires really strict orthodoxy, these far-right people. You have to be sufficiently within the bounds. You have to be sufficiently masculine, sufficiently feminine, sufficiently American. And those are always goalposts that they're necessarily moving because you cannot define them. You know? You can't strictly define them. And so there's always some issue within these people. They're always infighting. Now, there's been other cases in the past, right? But the most obvious one now was the spat between Elon Musk and Trump not too long ago. And I saw that shit coming. You know? Because their system of beliefs entails the idea of the whole lone wolf thing. You know, it's self-mythologization for one, so it's bullshit. But I'm saying is that, you know, this whole alpha lone wolf thing, that men need to be men, and, you know, this hierarchical stuff. Well, you can't have a system of lone wolves. There necessarily needs to be a subservient person. And you see this when Trump and Elon Musk run into each other when they had that spat, which is not the first time they had that spat, by the way. Right? These people are always frothing at the mouth that someone is not sufficiently for the cause. And that's their biggest weakness. Is that the enemy is always within. There's always another ghost in the machine that needs to be dealt with. An apparition. And that apparition is highly malleable. You know? We've always seen this in white supremacist circles anyways, that people aren't sufficiently white. I mean, you spend enough time there, and I'm gonna go deep for a second here, but you've seen racist debate about whether Argentinians are white. And then you get the idea like, oh, this is not gonna work out for them. Because they're trying to hit a target that is always in flux. It's always moving. These things are not sciences. They're faith. It's faith. These systems are always about sufficient whiteness, sufficient Americanness, sufficient patriotism. You know, the term conservative wasn't something that liberals created. You know? That's a slang that their own kind created. You know, conservatives that are just not sufficiently for the cause. You're a cuckservative, you know? And I'm sure that term has fallen out of vogue in those circles, but it's just my point, you know? It's always like an extreme version of what, it's always a stream like Matryoshka doll. It's, and every iteration is more radical than the other one. And if you don't fit to those circles, you're not part of the cause, therefore you're the enemy. Which is, again, a big flaw in these people's belief systems. And they will eventually defeat themselves. They will eat themselves alive. So if you're worried of Trumpism and all this stuff, you know, if we're ever going to be able to defeat it, I mean, in time, they'll just defeat themselves. And my original point was that they were genius for the kind of rhetorical moves they do, is that they paint their attacks on the Constitution as defenses. Now, okay, let me phrase that a little better. They frame their very clear anti-constitutional stances as defenses against it, or defenses for it. I'm mumbling my words here, but let me try to make this even clearer than that. It's a bit of a concept here, but it holds water. So they frame the, so for example, let's talk about the trans stuff, the trans child care or whatever, right? They frame the transitioning stuff for children. They frame that as a defense for children, that it's child abuse, right? the sort of what is it, the gay agenda, being taught that gay people exist in schools, they frame that as a defense. What is it, a defense of, I don't know, what parents should be allowed to teach, or a defense against children, because those are sexual concepts, you know, like children shouldn't be taught those things, right? That's a conversation between, you know, a parent or whatever, you know? Same thing with the whole vaccination mandates. They paint that as a parental issue. That's their defense. It's not that they're anti-vaccine and have all these wacky beliefs about autism and mercury and blah, 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 blah. It's not that they hate gay people and find trans people repugnant. It's a defense, you know, it's a defense for children if you really think about it. It's parental rights. And all these things are an affront to their own beliefs. They're contradictions because they're, you know, they paint themselves as free speech warriors, but not that free speech. They paint themselves as individuals' right to choose, you know, to live their own lives, but they also want to ban any form of like vaccination programs. They want to get rid of all of it. You know, the whole abortion thing was a big one. It's like, well, if you're so for people being able to choose for what they want to do in their own individual lives, then why do you want to ban it everywhere? That's how they framed it before, right? States' rights. States should be allowed to choose who, you know, who can provide abortions. No, apparently they can't. They can't. It's a lot, folks. It's a lot, folks. This was originally a video game stream. I guess going back to my point here, let me finish this. Is that this is genius, is that they paint their kind of anti-First Amendment stances, their hypocrisy as defenses. And that's good because that moves the goalpost for liberals who will argue it at face value. Right? But they fucked up. Trump fucked up. And this is what I mean about their hubris is also their biggest enemy too. Because the Department of Defense was already an incredible rhetorical move. The name of that thing was hilarious because they can frame, they then can frame their sort of world policing, their geopolitical attempts at grabbing power as a defense against terrorists, as a defense against national interests, right? Department of Defense. It's genius, really. It's genius. And then this fucking moron, the Department of War. How fucking stupid do you have to be to... So when Trump is on trial a couple years from now, right, for, I don't know, genocide in the United States, right? Hypothetical. And he's on Nuremberg Part 2, right? Sequel, Reloaded. You know, directed by Sam Raimi or some shit, right? He's on the stand. And he's, you know, pleading his case. Well, it wasn't, you know, I did it. It was, these were infiltrators and I didn't really set out to murder an entire ethnic group. And well, okay, well, and the prosecutors, well, you know, we have this memo from the Department of War. Department of War that's saying that you wanted to nuke the entire state of California. What was that about? Well, you understand what I mean? It's absurd. You know? You lose plausible deniability. It's so stupid. Oh, it's just like, what was the joke I was thinking about last time? It's like, you know, if there was a department that was the department that was just known for being corrupt or some bullshit, right? there would be, for example, just an example, like Department of Finance or some shit, right? It's known for the revolving door of open corruption, of insider trading, right? But it's the Department of Finance, right? So it's like, well, we didn't mean, you know, that. It's just like it's bad actors, right? So there's some plausible deniability, right? Now imagine you rename the Department of Finance Department of Corruption, Department of Illicit Trading. This is essentially what this idiot did, and I just find that just chef's kiss of absolute far-right incompetence. The fact that their own hubris is going to get them in trouble. Department of War. Well, soldier, why did you rape that entire village? Why did you? Well, I mean, I do come from the Department of Rape. Department of Sexual Assault. It says right there. I mean, if it was a Department of Defense, you'd have a, you know. Anyways, Trump 2028. He's gonna win again. And democracy is a facade. 7-Eleven was a part-time job. Let me play a round of this game before I get my day going. I have completely lost the plot. I don't think anyone's listening anyway, so it's all good. But let's get to the gaming now. Now with Megabonk, I have actually been interesting with a lot of these games. It's like the first time you beat it, it takes a very long time because the game is quite hard, you know? And so it took me a while to beat it once, and I did. I think after like 20 hours, I finally managed to beat the first stage 1 boss. Forgot with who though. It might have been with Clank or CL4NK, whatever his name is. And then shortly after, I kind of got the rhythm of like kind of the meta, you know. And I have since managed to beat this game with 4 other characters. Now I'm trying with my 5th, I believe, this guy. I guess the bad, well, not the bad strategy, but the incomplete strategy before that I tried that was not successful was that I was really focusing on building strengths up with just the base stats of the character. So I was relying mostly on their strengths, right? On the starter weapon, primarily the starter weapon. So I would just be skipping and banishing things that didn't give me high damage and increase my crits. No focus on real health or anything like that. No focus on other weapons, and you know, on paper it seems like a winning strategy. You get really strong with the one weapon you have, you save money, you turn that over, you know, to upgrades. But the way the game works is that one weapon is just not ever strong enough. It's strong, you know, it's strong. Like some characters have really high crits and high. This guy has really high damage scaling. Well, not really high, but it's just not enough. And that's what I learned. And you can't just rely on your weapon and dodging. You really do have to essentially make yourself more well-rounded, and focusing on things like lifesteal and HP maxing and sort of synergies with certain weapons helps. And then, but most of all, it's you do kind of need to generally, I mean, for basic success, I'm sure you can obviously win this game with, you know, very sort of isolationist strategies. You can just kind of rely on your first starter weapon. I'm sure, yeah, absolutely. That being said, for consistent basic success, you do have to rely on almost the entire toolset here. Primarily, what I find is that focusing on damage shouldn't be the top priority necessarily. It should be, but it should almost share that with health scaling and regeneration, or lifesteal even better. That's what I found is the most successful. So I have managed to beat it with that kind of general strategy in mind a couple times now. So I'm trying to do it with this guy. And anyways, I feel I talk too much, so I'm gonna just play games now. Ooh, Kevin, that's good. get like really fast enemies, I'm gonna be in trouble. I gotta hurry up and get some upgrades here. Oh my god, these are horrible. Oh god, I'm totally fucked. Okay, movement speed's not garbage, but... Oh my god. About to die. Kevin can kill me, so boy, if I make it past this, I'm gonna be really surprised. Might be one hit away from me. Oh, yeah. Alright, well, I am gonna wrap it up. I spent too much time talking and all my energy's gone. Anyways, happy election day, everybody. Don't lose your head, please. Stay safe.